If you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, surely the biggest, most important thing for you heading into this 2021 season was whether or not Joe Burrow was going to stay healthy all year and how much he was going to develop. Because you have all of your eggs in the Joe Burrow basket. Everything about this organization is all about Joe Burrow and what he can be and what he can become as the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. And look, I totally get it. You're hoping that he could take a huge step forward in year two, but if nothing else, you just want him to make it through the entire year healthy. No more big-time leg injuries. And then you see the team spend quite a bit on defense, and you're saying, why aren't you addressing the offensive line more? And then certainly if you're a Bengals fan, you were on one side of the fence or the other when it came to the big draft debate of whether you take Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. I was of the opinion, like, you take the better player, which was Jamar Chase. You got to have some weapons. You'll figure out the offensive line shit later. I'd rather take the number one wide receiver than the right tackle. That's just me personally. But whatever Bengals fans ultimately expected to get out of the season, boy, did they end up getting a whole hell of a lot more. But then you say, was that a great thing or was that a bad thing? Because there's a lot of pain associated with that. And early on in the season, it didn't look that incredibly promising. Like, this team lost to the Bears in week 2, and they looked bad doing so. The 3 straight plays with turnovers by Joe Burrow, like I was calling them mid. And at that point, he deserved it. I was absolutely wrong, obviously. I was sitting there saying Zach Taylor has the look of a coach that should be fired at the end of the year. I was clearly also wrong there. Hey, shit happens. They proved my ass wrong. But you would be hard-pressed to not blame me after watching that game and saying that this team is going nowhere fast. Because they looked terrible. They looked terrible. And then a few weeks later, they lose to the Jets like they're losing to some bum-ass teams. But when it all came down to it, they found a way to ultimately win the AFC North. They got into the playoffs, got a home playoff game. And that's where the magic carpet ride started. They held off the Raiders in the wild card round. They go into Tennessee to take on the number 1 seed, the Tennessee Titans, and find a way to get out of there with the victory too. And now you're getting to the AFC Championship game, and you're taking on the 2-time defending conference champions, Kansas City Chiefs. It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid, it's in Arrowhead. It's a big spot for the Bengals. And personally, I thought like this was probably going to be the end of the road for them. And in that first half, it certainly looked like it. Like, you're a bad Mahomes decision away from the Chiefs either being up 24 or 28-10 at the half in that game. But the bad decision was made. And the Bengals are lucky to go down only 11 at the half. And they came out like gangbusters in the second half. And they just smacked the Chiefs in the fucking mouth. And even though the Chiefs kind of sort of recovered and forced it to overtime, Evan McPherson's game winner in overtime sent the Bengals, of all damn teams, to the fucking Super Bowl. Who the hell would have seen this coming? But tell me if you heard this before, Bengals fans, those especially you that are old enough to remember the days, especially Super Bowl 23. It's another heartbreaking Super Bowl loss, ultimately, for the Cincinnati Bengals. They had the lead with less than 2 minutes to go. The California team makes a big drive. Excuse me. And ends up scoring a late touchdown, and that's the difference. Yeah. Touchdown by the Super Bowl MVP. Older Bengals fans know that pain. And then when you get the ball back, you still have some time. You can make something happen. And then on that big third down, you're not running the ball with Joe Mixon. You're running the ball with Samaje Perine. Who the fuck does that? And then, of course, on 4th down, Aaron Donald gets penetration, breaks up the timing of the play for Burrow, and it's all she wrote in this. Los Angeles Rams are Super Bowl champions. The Cincinnati Bengals, for the 3rd time in organization history, are 2nd place. And this is rough because you can look and see all these positives and say Burrow had over 4,600 yards passing, even while he was getting killed by that offensive line that still needs work. But they got to the Super Bowl, and he made it through the entire season healthy, even though he was taking a beating. Mixon had over 1,200 yards on the ground. Jamar Chase had a special-ass rookie season. T. Higgins is also very good. Both of them going over 1,000 yards. Jamar Chase going over 1,400 yards. Looking every bit the part of a big-time number 1 elite wide receiver in the National Football League. You look at a couple of their big free agent signings on defense. Larry Ogunjobi, who now is actually going to be with the Chicago Bears, had 7 sacks. Trey Hendrickson had 14. So a lot of these things, a lot of these moves ultimately worked out in a big way for the Cincinnati Bengals. But you wonder, like, did they make it to the Super Bowl because they were actually that good? Or was it a combination of fortune and circumstance that got them there? We'll see. Time will tell. But the really nice thing for the Bengals is that they made it to the Super Bowl. They've got a quarterback that's on a rookie contract that looks like he's going to be the dude. They've got over $30 million in cap space. You know, only a couple of real notable free agents on the team, specifically Jesse Bates and then C.J. Uzomah. And you certainly have the money to retain both of those guys. Now it's time to go into this draft and fix the trenches on both sides of the ball and build up the trenches on both sides of the ball. You got to find a right tackle. That's priority number one here. Or if you say you'd rather not have Jonah Williams continue to play left tackle, okay, well then draft a left tackle and move Jonah over to the right side or inside the guard or whatever the hell you're going to do. But an offensive tackle has to be priority number one. And then looking at right guard as well, like fixing that right side of the offensive line. That has to be the priority because you can't continue to think it's sustainable to have Joe Burrow get sacked 51 times in a freaking season. That's not good. Got to beef up that offensive line because that flaw ultimately showed itself at different points at times in the playoffs, and it came down to the Rams to be able to ultimately be in a position to exploit that. And then you look at them defensively. They could certainly use some help inside at tackle, especially with losing Ogunjobi in free agency. Could use some more depth at defensive end opposite of Trey Hendrickson. I would say, too, in the back end of their defense, maybe a little depth at corner wouldn't hurt because when you're counting on Eli Apple to play big minutes at corner, you're not doing it right. But for the Bengals, the crazy thing is they made it to the Super Bowl. You probably haven't seen Joe Burrow's best football. Jamar Chase was a rookie. Their offensive line needs quite a bit of work. And they got where the heck they got in spite of all of that. They got there with a young quarterback playing high-level football, a bunch of weapons on offense, and a middle-of-the-road defense. That was built up a lot through free agency. If anything, the Cincinnati Bengals should be the type of formula that show you, like, once you get a young quarterback, this is how you build around the young quarterback, and you can be in the mix in a very, very big hurry. And now the Cincinnati Bengals are one of those teams that you look at, and you can't dismiss them. Like, certainly it's going to be tough to get back into that position next year, but you know, all their key offensive pieces are going to be back. Joe Burrow is going to be entering year 3, which is a lot of times when you expect a young quarterback to take a major significant jump in who they are. The needle's certainly pointing upwards for the Bengals. Now, maybe it's a fact of they would have lost to the Bills in the AFC Championship game. I believe they would have, but Bills didn't make it. Bengals did, and they beat the Chiefs. They beat the Titans. Like, you can't take away from the road to the playoffs because it wasn't easy. The Raiders were a game-tough opponent with a solid quarterback in Derek Carr. The Tennessee Titans were the number 1 seed, and they had Derrick Henry coming back off of injury. Then you have the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, and you go into Arrowhead and beat them the week after you beat Tennessee in Tennessee. Like, my props to the Bengals for a season that after the first couple of weeks was looking really, really rough. Like, they barely beat the Vikings, and then they lose in that ugly fashion of the Chicago Bears. To get to the point where they lose a Super Bowl by 3 points, holy shit. You want to talk about a dramatic turnaround. The future, indeed, looks very bright for these Bengals.